Welcome to part two of a three-part series on pipeline management. Last week, we talked about how to hit your quota and a lot of the little factors that come into play when you are trying to hit your quota and where people typically fail and that sort of thing. In today's session, I want to talk a little bit more about the actual breakdown of what goes into your pipeline. So typically, when I review somebody's pipeline that is brand new to government contracting, they have two or three opportunities in it, if that. They're just getting started. And when I look at the opportunities, most of the stuff in there is what I would consider like really long-term stuff. And so my question is always, how are you going to pay the bills now? Like, how are you going to pay the bills just in the next 6 months, in the next 12 months? How are you going to do that when everything in your pipeline is more than 12 months out? Like, I mean, we're talking 24 to 36 months out. Now, those are strategic good opportunities, but the majority of your pipeline, somewhere in the 75 to 80% of your pipeline, should be short-term, what I consider tactical revenue. Now, doesn't mean you don't look at and don't entertain some of those other opportunities, but our focus initially is how do we keep the lights on? How do we pay employees and all those sort of things? And you do that with short-term tactical revenue. And that's what's really key. So it's things that are hopefully going to close in a window of 3 to 6 months, maybe 12 months at the very, very latest. But you need some of those short-term opportunities in there. And look, you don't have to go and say, well, I just want to respond to anything that comes on SAM. No, that's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is you can be strategic about short-term opportunities that are at your target agencies and are things that are going to close within a 6 to 12 month period. So those are the types of opportunities that I want to see the most of in your pipeline. And so those are often not going to be the 20 million, 500 million, billion-dollar contracts. That's not what it's going to be. It's going to be 250,000, 500,000, million, $2, $3, $4 million size projects. It's going to be the smaller end of that spectrum. If you're brand new in government contracting, that's what you need anyway. You don't need to be focusing on contracts that are $8 to $10 million if the biggest project you ever did was $500,000. You need to be somewhere in your size scope to make sure you're even going to be competitive on those proposals. So when I look at the mix of what is in your pipeline, I want to see mostly short-term stuff. So 80% of it needs to be short-term, going to close 3, 6, 12 months. That's what I want to see. And I want to see most of it, so 80% of that needs to be stuff that's within your size scope. You're not swinging for the fences on every single opportunity. If I sit down and look at your pipeline and say, hey, the biggest project you ever did, whether it's government or commercial, is $500,000, and everything in your pipeline is $10 to $20 million, I'm going to say, look, we got to go back to the drawing board. Everything is too big. Now, we're going to be selective about these $10 to $20 million ones and look for teaming partners on that, and that's something you can do. But we've got to get those short-term opportunities in there, got to get cash flow running through the business and that sort of thing. That other 15 to 20%, yes, it should be strategic. It's probably going to be longer term, more than 12 months, maybe 24, 36 months, that sort of thing. It's also probably going to require teaming partners in that sort of thing. And so those are good strategic opportunities to have in your pipeline. A part of that mix can also be contract vehicles. So I don't want to see a pipeline that is overloaded in nothing but contract vehicles. And what I mean by that, we're like, hey, we're trying to get on this contract and we're trying to get on this big contract, this big GWAC or MAC or whatever it is. They got all the different abbreviations for them, or this BPA, or there's all kind of things you could be chasing, these IDIQs, where it's not actually money. It's just the opportunity to chase money. And that should not be a significant portion of your pipeline either. So out of that 15 to 20% that's strategic, some of that can be contract vehicles, even GSA. Some of that can be those types of contract vehicles and that sort of thing. But the majority of your pipeline, the 80%, needs to be short-term tactical revenue until you've got a really good system and you're growing significantly through that. And then once you get to a point where you have what I would consider steady cash flow. You've won a bunch of contracts. You're growing at a good pace, but you've got steady, consistent cash flow. Then you can look at maybe reducing that percentage. Maybe it drops from 80 to 65, 70%, and maybe more of the stuff that goes in your pipeline becomes long-term strategic stuff. But initially, 80%. Remember that number, 80% should be short-term strategic stuff that's going to close this calendar year, hopefully, or in the next 12 months within your business, so that you're putting food on the table, keeping the lights on, growing the business, getting past performance, that kind of stuff. And then the other 20% is strategic. So that should be your focus on the mix that's in your pipeline, as well as the size and scope of what's in your pipeline. There's a lot of other factors you can use, but I find those are the main factors that are really, really important to the breakdown of your pipeline. So this was video 2 of 3 on pipeline management. Next week, I'm going to talk about sales KPIs. So those are key performance indicators for those who don't know that one. And that's how you kind of track the metrics on your sales activities. We're going to break that down a little bit in the video in next week. So be sure and subscribe to make sure you get that video. You want to be notified of that. I think there's a little notification bell you can turn on, all that kind of cool stuff on YouTube. Make sure you get it. But be sure and subscribe so you can get part 3 of this pipeline management series that's going to come next week. And if you have any questions about this, you know how to reach me. We'll see you next time.